I feel like they went the right way about it. Like they put a glossary in the back where like George was like, I've heard that in America, you don't speak English. She's like, here's what some words mean.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachael.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
the podcast where we should all over our books.
And today we have an exciting episode. We already talked to Claire Handscombe, who is the host of the Brit Lit podcast. And we had a really fun conversation with her about British books and which books you should be paying attention to. And she gave a lot of great recommendations. So I'm excited for everyone to hear what she has to say. But first, Rachael, what are you reading this week?
So I, if anyone follows me on Instagram, might have seen I was doing this, but I just finished a 24-hour readathon that I filmed a vlog for my YouTube channel. But I've been wanting to reread the Graceling Realm series, as the listeners know. And so I decided to just try to binge the whole series in 24 hours. And I almost got all 3 of the old ones done. So I read Graceling and Fire all the way through, and then I'm on page 180 of Bitter Blue. So I'll probably finish that today because I also have the audiobook from my library, so I can listen to it when I can't sit down and read. But it's been really fun to revisit this series. I like it even more this time around, and I can't wait to get to the new one that just came out, which I do have. So that's why I wanted to reread these so that I could get to that quickly, because I didn't want to go into it not really remembering all the details. And there are some things that I forgot. So I'm glad that I did that.
That's the thing with fantasy series. I find I prefer to read them all when they're all out because otherwise I do forget.
Right.
Yeah. Kelly, what are you reading?
I am reading The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. I love her books. This one is a little bit of a departure for her because it's kind of based on a true story, although there's a fantasy element too. But it's about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart as a child and his older sister, who is also musically gifted, but who we have never heard about. Because, you know, what happens if you're great at music, but your little brother is Mozart?
Right.
Nothing good, I'll tell you. So I'm very early in, I think only on chapter 3, but I really like it so far. And her books are amazing. So I know this will be another one I love.
Cool. Well, like I said, we already pre-recorded our interview with Claire, and I immediately went out and found one of the books she recommended, which was Olive by, I think, Emma Gannon. And I was lucky enough to get the audiobook from NetGalley. So I've been listening to that. I'm already about halfway through. I absolutely love it. It's so good. It talks about motherhood, and the main character is child-free, and she's in her 30s and kind of grappling with how her friends are all having kids and grappling with whether or not she wants to have kids. And it just is really hitting home for me, and just where I am at in my life. So it's just great. So thank you, Claire, for recommending that. And you'll hear us hear about it later, but it's really good. And I think it comes out pretty soon this March. And then I'm also in the middle of Temporary by Hilary Leichter. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name. I'm sorry, but we'll have her on the podcast next week. So we'll be able to talk to her about that. It is delightful. I wish more people were talking about this book because it's like a modern mythology. And I love it. So I can't wait for you two to read it.
Great.
I actually have it. I have not read it yet.
But you will.
But I will, and I will very soon. Okay, so book news. We're kind of back to good news, and this is a double political book news, which is fun. So Hillary Clinton has written, I think, 4 nonfiction books at least, 3 of which were memoirs. She is now writing fiction. She and mystery author Louise Penny, who is apparently one of her really good friends too, they're co-writing a mystery called State of Terror, and it's going to be out October 12th. Her husband wrote a book with James Patterson that I tried to read and could not get into, but I'm very excited for this one. Apparently, she and Louise Penny were having this conversation, and Louise asked something like, "What's the thing you're most afraid of?" And apparently the answer is the plot of this book.
Whoa.
Wow. Oh, that's so exciting. I remember her mentioning either in a book or an interview or something about the fact that she was friends with Louise Penny, and I've read a couple of her books, and I just thought that was such a nice tidbit of information. So it's really fun to hear they've teamed up to write a book.
Yeah.
And I really like in her most recent nonfiction, What Happened, she talks about how much she and Bill read, and apparently they're really active readers, and they keep lists of everything they read. So if by some miracle she hears this podcast, I would really appreciate it if you would share that list.
Yes.
You know, we all need more to read, but it's good to have like famous people also writing books when you know that they are actually active readers too.
Yeah.
So super fun.
Hilary, please come on our podcast.
I know, right? You have a new podcast too. We could, do some cross promotion. I'm just saying. If anyone knows Louise Penny, you should also come on.
Yes, I've never read any of her books, but
I haven't either, but apparently they're great.
yeah, I like mysteries, so I should try some.
Yeah. In even more fun news, former speaker John Boehner has a book coming out himself. It's he's doing this audiobook and charging $40 for it, which I'm told is ridiculously expensive for an audiobook. But his hook is, I will be recording it I'm recording it myself, and I will be drinking wine, and there will be fun asides and unfiltered comments. And one that has already been recorded includes the line, "Ted Cruz, go fuck yourself," which I am pretty sure is a thought that we have all had a billion times. At least I have, easily a billion times, because that guy is the worst. And I thought, okay, this story can't get better. And then it did, because somebody asked Ted Cruz about it. And Ted Cruz said something like, "So apparently John Boehner told me to do something that's anatomically impossible." And then he said, "So I responded, 'Who's John Boehner?'" And I'm like, ooh. And
really good comeback.
I mean, not that I ever thought that I would have to make this choice, but I kind of think John Boehner is cooler than Ted Cruz. Neither of them are really my favorite, but
I mean, yeah, I think Ted Cruz is bottom of the barrel awful.
Yeah.
And I saw on Twitter, and I wish I remember who said this because it's perfect, but somebody said something like, if the Zodiac is still alive, he's going to have to issue a statement that he is not Ted Cruz, because that's my favorite Twitter rumor, that Zodiac is Ted Cruz.
Oh my God, that's right.
Zodiac's
like, I don't want to be associated with that guy.
Yeah, like, that guy's awful. He's got nothing to do with me. But like you said, I do want to issue, like, even though Ted Cruz is awful, and even though I agree with John Boehner on this one thing, both of these men are awful. Like, they're not good people. They're not
right.
They're not people to look up to or listen to. And
John
But
Boehner
I'm
was
not
just
against him on
smart
this.
enough. He was just smart enough to get out of politics before the Trump dumpster fire happened.
Yeah, I would agree. But
Fun.
go fuck yourself, Ted Cruz.
Okay, so we're going to move on to recent acquisitions, where we talk about the books that we have acquired over the past week. So why don't we start with Kelly?
Okay, so I was really lucky. I got Ye Galleys of Cool for the Summer by Dahlia Adler, and Sloppy First by Megan McCafferty, which was one of my favorite books, and they are re-releasing it for the 20th anniversary, and thank you for that, Macmillan. But they're redoing it with an introduction from Rebecca Searle, who I love, and an afterword from Megan McCafferty, who wrote the book, who I love. And I adore those books so much. If you liked Daria, if you like sarcastic teenage girls who overthink everything all the time, this is a series for you. It is wonderful, and I'm really happy that they're re-releasing it. I hope it'll get a whole bunch of new fans. Feels a little aggressive to point out that it's been decades, but I guess that's fine. Also awesome. I bought Wings of Ebony by Elle, which looks fantastic. We're doing a sci-fi fantasy episode soon, and I think this will be perfect for that. And best of all, my signed copy of Life in the Balance from my friend Jen Petro-Roy. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's a little, I don't want to say little girl, she would hate that, but a tween girl who is a softball player, and she's swinging, and it's just a beautiful cover and a great book. And Jen is great and one of my favorite people, so everybody please read it. It is wonderful.
Nice.
What's it about?
Okay, so the girl, she's a softball player and she's really good at it. Her entire family, like her mom played and was really good. Her grandma played, and her great grandma was one of the people in the women's baseball league during World War II, the League of Their Own thing.
Oh,
it's so good. And like that is really one of the best ways that she connects with her mom. But her mom is also an alcoholic who has to go into rehab, and it's becoming like this big family secret. Like, we don't talk about it, we don't acknowledge it, and she is just so devastated that her life is changing and her mom is going to be gone for months. And even though she knows it's the best thing, like, it's still scary. And she's got this tryout for this major like softball, like best players in the area team, and she doesn't know if she can do it without her mom coaching her. And it's just so good and so powerful. And I love that it's this really unexpected story about a girl who's trying to figure out who she is and what she wants and how to move forward, really, without this relationship that she's so used to. And her dad, not surprisingly, not doing super well. And he's also, rehab's expensive, so he's working multiple jobs and not home very much. So, you know, her life is falling apart, and now she's more by herself than ever before. And it's so good. And it sounds like a dark and depressing book, and it's really not. So
it sounds really good.
it's so good. And it's her best one, and her others have been really good too. So
cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I just have one recent acquisition this week. It was a pre-order that I put in at the recommendation of Emma from Drinking by My Shelf on YouTube. It's called Love is for Losers. It's by Wibke Brueggemann, I think is how you pronounce her name.
What a name.
It has been described as a, compared to Louise Rennison's books, the Georgia Nicolson diary series. So it is, I think, told in diary entries. And it's about a girl, I think she's in secondary school, and she loves math, I guess, which is kind of neat. So I look forward to it. It sounds really fun and cute and funny.
It's a British book, so
Yes.
So apropos of today's episode.
Yes, for sure.
Well, I don't really have any recent acquisitions this week, except for, like I said, Olive on NetGalley, but I would like to acquire some new books. And I think that Book of the Month just posted their March books. So should we do a live reaction?
It is back to pizza break.
No!
No, it can't be.
Guys,
We'll just
Mine's
like...
still up. Mine is still up.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay.
Great.
Because I haven't navigated away from it.
We'll use Rachael's and hope it doesn't go away. Now, Kelly, you're spoiled already. You know what the main picks are, but you don't know what the add-ons are.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. But Rachael and I haven't yet explored the main picks.
You have patience and an ability to deal with instant gratification. I have neither of those things. Okay.
All right.
I have it on my app, so I can participate too.
Okay. Ooh.
Okay.
All right, we're looking at the first pick, which is called The Final Revival of Opal and Nev. For fans of Daisy Jones and the Six, a rollicking tale with equal parts rock and roll and Black feminist punk spirit.
Oh, fun. And it's historical fiction by Donnie Walton.
And a debut, which is one of the things that we...
Oh, no.
One of the things we need. The next one, should I go, because it is up on the app?
Yeah, but don't navigate away.
I will not.
I totally didn't mean to do that.
Oh, you know what, Rachael, just go backwards. It might come back up.
That's what I'm trying.
Oh, okay. Ah, darn. That's all right. It'll come back.
I feel like we
want to wait and
over.
see if it does, or should I go on the...
You can say it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
the next one is a fantasy debut, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner.
Ooh.
This is one of the ones that people were really hoping would be there. The quick take is, forget healing salves or soothing tinctures. This underground apothecary specializes in one thing, the art of poison. And it has this little good to know thing under every book. The 4 for this one is supernatural, puzzle, magical, murder.
What?
Okay, interesting.
That does sound fun.
This is another one I really want to read. The third one is a thriller, Too Good to Be True by Carola Lovering. That may not be her actual name pronunciation. I am probably wrong. The quick take, unsettling and twisted, this creepy thriller will make you wonder which of its narrators is telling the truth. The good to know, unreliable narrator, creepy, love triangle, graphic violence. And it has the FYI, this book has scenes that depict sexual assault and childhood trauma. And the author of Necessary People is the one who picked it for Book of the Month Club.
Ooh.
Okay.
Number 4 is an early release contemporary fiction, In a Book Club Far Away by Tiff Marcello. The quick take, estranged friends reconnect to heal past wounds in this heartwarming story of friendship, forgiveness, and army life. Good to know, 400 plus pages, female friendships, marriage issues, book about books.
That sounds good.
Nice.
I am really excited for all of these. They all sound amazing. The last one is the other one that people were really hoping would be there. It's literary fiction, What's Mine and Yours by Naima Koster. Quick take. With warmth and empathy, this multi-generational novel traces the lives of 2 families in a divided Southern community. And good to know, slow build, family drama, nonlinear timeline, suburban drama. And the synopsis, because they don't really tell you anything. A community in the Piedmont of North Carolina rises in outrage as a county initiative draws students from the largely Black east side of town into predominantly white high schools on the west. For 2 students, G and Noelle, the integration sets off a chain of events that will tie their 2 families together in unexpected ways over the span of the next 20 years.
Ooh.
Wow.
I
love multi-generational
Yeah.
stories.
Me too.
So those all sound really good. I'm not sure if there's anything where I'm like, I have to have that quite yet. Should we look at the add-ons?
Well, the historical fiction, I definitely want the final revival of Opal and Nev, because for fans of Daisy Jones and the Six, yes. And then Black feminist punk spirit, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does sound cool. It's just I don't typically read like Daisy Jones and the Six hasn't appealed to me so far. So I don't know if it's quite my genre.
Right. And so far we do not have add-ons.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll
they
see.
all look, they're all old ones.
Yeah.
Although the Lost Apothecary, does it have time travel?
I don't know. I don't think so, but it might. Okay, I mean, I see that the woman who submitted for Why I Love It, I don't know.
It does. It has a time traveling detective. Okay, that might be the one.
I mean, I feel like it really had me at like Poison, but this sounds nice.
Well, I think these are good options, though. I'm intrigued. I'm going to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny because the one I want the least is usually the one that I would go to first, the thriller. But I don't know. It says unsettling and twisted, and it's called a creepy thriller. So
you know you're going to get them all.
That feels very accurate. Yeah. Oh, and also they restocked the Push, The Heiress Gets a Duke, and which was the other one? I think Bad Muslim Discount was also sold out. That's back. And Mike Chen's We Could Be Heroes is still there too.
Oh, I do.
That also looks really good.
That looks good.
Yeah. So no new add-ons, but a bunch of old ones.
Shitheads, if you want to get your first book of the month box for under $10, use our code at checkout. It's What You Should Read. So that's all one word, What You Should Read, at checkout at bookofthemonth.com. And you can get one of these, our options or some add-ons. So check it out. And that is our intro. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have our interview with Claire Handscombe. So stick around and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back, and today we are joined by Claire Handscombe. Hi, Claire.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You are a host of a podcast as well as an author. So tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm British, as you can immediately hear, but I've lived in Washington, D.C. for 8.5 years, which is much longer than I ever intended to be here, but here we are. I work at a small local community bookstore called East City Bookshop, which is a lot of fun, although it was more fun prior to all the things happening last year, but it's still really fun. And I do a bit of social media for them, which is fun too. And yeah, I host the Brit Lit podcast, which is a show showcasing British books and the world of British publishing more broadly. So I interview authors, but I also interview other podcasters and bookstagrammers and editors and just people in that world in general.
Cool. And what brought you to the States originally?
So I have given up trying to sound cleverer than I am or more normal than I am. I had a big West Wing obsession. So I came to visit Washington, D.C. because I was obsessed with the West Wing, and I really fell in love with D.C. And at the same time, I was falling in love with writing as well. And so I married the two, and I came to study an MFA in creative writing, because you can't just show up at the embassy and ask them to give you a visa because you love the West Wing, sadly. So yeah, so I did an MFA and I wrote a novel as part of that, which I think we'll talk about my novel later. But that was 2012 to 2015. So DC was quite different then. It was kind of a different time, kind of an idyllic time looking back now. But I was so happy when I finished. I didn't really want to leave. So I applied for a different visa and I stayed.
Wow. I love the idea of loving a TV show so much and just wanting to see the city it's based in and then thinking, I guess I'll stay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we're kind of neighbors because Julia and I live in Baltimore.
Oh, cool.
We did not move here for The Wire, but I mean, we have Ann Tyler and John Waters and Laura Lippman, so
That's pretty cool.
yeah, there are a lot of other good reasons to come.
Danielle Evans is a Baltimore-based writer.
Yes.
Yeah, she was actually one of my professors at American University. So
Oh,
yeah.
I love her. Yeah.
She's great. She's so ridiculously smart. She speaks really fast, and it's kind of almost, you get the impression that this is just so much in her brain that she needs to get out and download, and so she has to do it really fast. And she's great. I was really lucky to study with her, and it's kind of infuriating because she's a lot younger than me. So it's like, how can you know so much more and be so much younger? This is not okay. But yeah, she's also lovely, so it's hard to resent her too much.
Great. Her book is brilliant. I've only read The Office of Historical Corrections, but I absolutely loved it. So that's really cool. You touched on this a little bit, but at the bookstore, how have things changed? Are you all open right now? How is that working?
We're open massively fewer hours than we were, because we have increased our e-commerce side of things. So there's a lot more happening online, which means we need more space in the store, and we need time when customers aren't around so we can do the admin side of that. I say I'm not involved at all in that side of things, which is better for everybody. So we open fewer days and slightly later, and then we basically lock the door and let people in one by one so that we don't go over our number of people, which is just really sad. I mean, it's kind of become normal, but I didn't get into book selling to keep people out of bookstores. Like, that's not my ideal way to spend my time. So it's kind of sad, but people wear face masks and we do the sanitizing and things like that. And it's definitely, there was a time when we were completely closed to customers, and this has definitely saved my sanity. Just having somewhere to go that isn't just my apartment, but also being around my lovely co-workers who all love books, and being around our customers and still being able to hand sell a bit and stuff. So I really miss the old days. There's a lot of strange things. It's harder to hear people because everyone's wearing masks and there's screens everywhere and, things like that. So, and we miss our in-person book clubs. We used to have a lot of those, and now they're all online, which, that's fine. But I think we all just want in-person stuff again. So it's been, I'm glad that I work there. It's been good, but I do long for the old days.
Sure. Well, we're excited to have you on because you host the Brit Lit podcast, so you know a lot about British books, and we were interested in just talking a little bit about, the differences between American publishing and book selling, and how it's different than over in the UK. So just in general, what are some differences that you have noticed that you find interesting?
There are some little differences. People always laugh at me when I say this, but I can tell by smelling a book whether it's American or British. They smell different. But leaving that and my weirdness.
Tea.
I'm going to need more specifics than that, please.
I don't know what it is, but I did when I traveled home to visit a friend in 2015, and she came to surprise me at the airport, and I missed her because I went to the bookstore at the airport to smell the books because they smell like home. So, it must be the glue or the ink or the paper or a combination of all three. So, and then they also, so hardbacks are smaller. Books are generally speaking a little bit cheaper in the UK, and I think that might be why hardbacks are smaller. I don't know. But then there's other little differences, like, and nobody knows why Tuesday is new release day in the US, at least. I mean, I've heard podcasts with people who know a lot about books saying they've tried to find out and they can't find out. So I don't think anybody really knows. And in the UK, it's Thursdays, and I don't think anyone really knows why either. So there's little differences like that. And then there's also covers usually change, and titles sometimes change when they, British books that come over here. A lot of the big American books also go to the UK, but quite a few don't. Sometimes they come later. Sometimes I mean, I'm sure you know from Publishers Weekly, like announcements and whatever, you know, sometimes a deal is done for world rights immediately and sometimes it takes longer. So yeah, it's not, I think I made the mistake of when I was living here, I sort of got sucked into the American book world, and I sort of made this mistake of thinking that everybody everywhere was reading what I was reading, but of course that's not true. And that's partly why I started the podcast, because I wanted to get back in touch with what was happening back home.
For sure. I mean, and there's some authors who, you know, we've probably never heard about because their books aren't distributed here. It's always interesting to me because I know like Marion Keys is one of my favorite authors, and for some reason her books don't seem to be being released in the US anymore, and I have no idea why. I've tried to find out, but I'm always like searching on Book Depository to see if I can get a copy.
Yeah, actually a hot tip for that kind of thing is blackwells.com. They're a British chain, much smaller than the other ones, and they do very good. It's not free delivery, but it's very reasonable price. So if you're looking for British books that you can't find here, that's one way to do it. Marion Keys is actually Irish, and I have noticed that Irish books often don't make it over. I mean, some do, like Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan came over, but I've been reading, there's a series of books. The first one is called Oh My God, What a Complete Aisling. And it's just this really funny 20-something-year-old trying to find her way, kind of Bridget Jonesy vibes. And it's really fun. And I needed something fun. And so I imported it over because it's not published here. And it's, I think partly it's not published here because they've left in all the Irish slang. And so as a Brit, I have to like make a slight leap. There are words I don't know, expressions I don't know. But to then leap across into American English would then, I think, just be one bridge too far. And if you took out all the Irish words from that book, it just wouldn't.
There would be no words.
I mean, that's half its charm. So, yeah.
That always interested me with like growing up. Obviously, Harry Potter was a big thing, and you know, I never read the UK versions of the books until this. Like a couple years ago, I bought some UK paperbacks and did a reread, and I was like, yeah, they changed a lot of this language for Americans. And it's like an American publisher would never like change bathroom to lavatory for it to sell in the UK. So it just seems weird for things like that. I don't know if anyone knows like what drives that, or, you know, is there some sort of,
they don't think we can figure out what philosopher means.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's one of my bugbears, and I import most of my British books from the UK. If an American publicist wants to send it to me and the British one doesn't, then I'm obviously going to take the free American copy rather than buy the buy the later British copy. But generally speaking, I import them because an American character speaking American English is perfectly fine, but I don't want to read my British characters speaking in American English. What's interesting though is I've been here a long time, and so I like grumble to myself about Americanisms and then realize that like actually maybe that is just what people say back home now. I just don't know. But I think there's an assumption, and it's not fair on American readers. I think that it's doing American readers a big disservice, but there's just this assumption that like, oh, we have to help them understand. Well, the whole point of reading is that you are constantly reading words you don't know and picking up on context cues and figuring out. I can understand maybe words like pants, words that have like a meaning in the other, you know, maybe, but even then we grow up, and this is part of it too, we grow up watching American shows, reading American books, and figuring out what it means. And it's part of the culture. And I think Harry Potter was probably one of the first big British things. And so Americans haven't quite, prior to that at least, weren't quite steeped in British culture the way we are steeped in American culture. And so I think that editors are just like, oh, we need to help them out. It's a bit too British. But I don't know. I really resent that. And I think, like I said, I think it's not giving American readers enough credit for figuring it out. And also people who are reading British books are reading British books because they want to read British books, not because they want to read an American book. There are plenty of American books if they wanted to read one. So
Right.
I do think it's a shame. And the Harry Potter thing, I was thinking about this. I think if it had been book 3 that was called Philosopher's Stone, they might have kept it. But I think because it was the first one and they were trying to get people to like it, because nobody, had heard of this series.
Yeah.
I guess they just needed to change it. Although, I mean, I don't know what a Sorcerer's Stone is either. So I don't know how it really helps. So
We have to learn what it is in the context of the story anyway.
Exactly.
The title. Yeah, that's true. And you're right. They're almost depriving us of part of the experience of the book by changing all of that. When, the Georgia Nicolson series was such a cute series that would have not been as fun if they had not used words like snogging and pants and
and I feel like they went the right way about it. Like they put a glossary in the back where George was like, I've heard that in America you don't speak English. She's like, here's what some words mean.
No, I think the glossary is really genius. I'm actually rereading. Well, not rereading. I was too old. I wasn't a teenager when they came out. And again, looking for fun books. And I'd heard so much about this series over the years. So I've been reading those bit by bit, and they are so much fun. But you can't change. I mean, most of her words are made up by her anyway, but you can't.
Oh, wait, nunga nungas is not an actual British word that you use?
Not that I know of, but I also, knew what it meant straight off. I didn't have anyone to tell me. The one I just read, that it actually was that one, I think, knocked out by her nunga nungas. I think that was the one I just read. She uses the phrase nippy noodles to mean cold. And I'm like, I mean, we do say it's a bit nippy, or at least old people say that. I don't know if anybody young says that. Like, I want to say that all the time. It's such a fun way to say it's cold, but nobody would know what I was saying. So.
Oh, that's fun.
When you mentioned the different covers and stuff, I definitely want to go back to that, because I always found it interesting how, why does that, I guess I didn't realize, of course, that there could be different covers in different countries, but I mean, it makes sense because it's a whole different market, different readers' tastes in terms of like what they like for artwork. But I find my taste usually gravitates toward the British covers. For some reason, I prefer those. Like I have this one of Addie LaRue, which I think is prettier than the American version.
Comparison
really has, which is still pretty. I mean, it's not like, but that's interesting to me.
My taste, I don't know, it sort of varies. I was thinking about this before we were speaking, and I don't know if you read the novel Eleanor Oliphant. It's Completely Fine. It was big-ish here, but in the UK it was like a huge bestseller the year it came out. And the US cover is basically like the back of a woman's head, or a woman half cut off, or it basically could be a book about any woman wearing an orange jumper / sweater. But in the UK, the book matches in the shape of a house, which is much, much, much more relevant to the story, and much more like it's unique to that story. It's not like, here's a picture of a woman. So in that case, I much prefer the British cover. But on the other hand, I was also thinking there's a trend for, so the kind of, well, they're often called rom-coms, but they're not always funny, like the kind of, modern contemporary romance novels. The UK covers at the moment, the kind of trend seems to be hand-drawn outlines of tiny people in the corner of the book. And they're actually quite nice, but they basically are all the same. I was looking at two of my favorites. So One Day in December is one of my recent favorites. And the other one is All About Us, which came out just before Christmas. And they're both a couple kissing, one are kissing under an umbrella and one set are kissing by a lamppost. But basically it's the same cover. And the One Day in December cover in the US is lovely. I absolutely love it. And I just don't really understand why they're making them all look the same. So in that case, I much prefer the US ones. So it kind of,
That happens in the US too, though. There are trends in covers
Yes.
where if it's you like a certain genre and you see a cover that reminds you of that book you loved, you're gonna gravitate towards it. So I think that's pretty consistent. But we love that book, the Juicy Silver book.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so
great.
good. I find a lot of my favorite contemporary romances are British, that one in particular, but just in general, I don't know why. I guess there's something about the setting for me that makes the contemporary romance more enjoyable.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's also because we Brits do being awkward really well, and awkwardness is such a good part of the beginning of a love story when you don't know each other or when you start to get attracted to each other. And I think that is probably quite British. Actually, I'm reading Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which comes out in a couple of weeks. And it's so good. I'm really enjoying it. But a massive part of that is how awkward the characters are around each other. And of course, there are awkward people in America too, but I feel like we embrace that more in the UK. So maybe that's part of the romance thing. I don't know.
That makes sense.
The sort of halting politeness.
Yes.
In every conversation.
And they're not quite saying what you mean, which Americans also don't always say what they mean, but it's in a different way. So
yeah. I like when like a Brit in a book like that will chastise themselves in their inner monologue of like, you fool. Why did you say that?
Yes.
I don't know if you would know this, but I love Michael Connelly's books, and they always seem to be released earlier in the UK, which is odd because he's definitely not like in the UK. So, I mean, not to be all, do I need to move so that I can get them early?
No, I wouldn't move. That seems like a drastic thing to do.
I'm also super awkward though. So I feel like
well, maybe you should. But yeah, I would maybe import them from blackwells.com. So the thing is, because books are cheaper in the UK, even with the delivery cost, it still ends up costing pretty much the same, if not less. So I would keep an eye on that. The bookseller is our equivalent of Publishers Weekly, and so that kind of tells you what's coming out when. But yeah, that's interesting. Sometimes I have noticed occasionally that American books come out earlier in the UK. I guess it's just all related to the inside world of publishing, which, I mean, I don't think publishing knows what it's doing half the time, so I certainly don't. But
that the UK publisher needs it in that on their calendar that time, and maybe they don't have another big release that week. The publisher probably has more big authors like that.
It could be that.
And I mean, I know they also get the James Bond movies earlier, but that makes sense. Like, that's exactly how things should go.
Well, and I think Philippa Gregory's books tend to come out earlier in the UK too, because she's based there.
I mean, in general, British books will come out earlier in the UK than here. Sometimes quite a bit earlier, because sometimes they're waiting to see how they do in the UK before they bring them over. Sometimes a book isn't even supposed to come over, and then it gets nominated for some big prize, and so then they rush it over here. And sometimes books that are big in the UK do come over here, but they're just not talked about. And I don't know whether it's so hard to tell with publishing whether no one's talking about this book because it's not going to do well, or it's not going to do well because no one's talking about it. It's like a bit of a vicious circle. So I don't really know how it all works. But the nice thing about working in a bookshop is that I can hand people books. I'm like, you won't have read this because nobody has read it in America, but it's really great. So yeah.
Speaking of which, I have a question. So you work in a bookstore here. Have you ever worked in any bookstores in the UK? And if so, what are some differences that you've noticed?
I haven't. I worked in WH Smith's for over one Christmas, which is basically the equivalent of Hudson News. So it's like they sell books, but I wouldn't call it a bookstore.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know that much about the world. I don't know it from the inside, I should say. Yeah, I think it's quite similar in lots of ways. In the old days, there was a lot more. So I was thinking back to my time at W.H. Smith's, but also Waterstone's, the big sort of Barnes and Noble like company, used to do a lot of 3 for 2 books. And so out on the tables, they'd be like, everything on this table is like 3 for the price of 2. But I don't think they do that as much anymore.
I miss that. I miss just going into Borders or Barnes and Borders.
I remember Borders.
Borders.
Yeah, we all miss it.
But yeah, you just go to the table and be like, what can I get 3 for 2? And
yeah.
Bookstore.
Tell us about your book, Unscripted. And I understand you had a different experience publishing in the UK and over here.
Yeah, so my book came out I was going to say last year, but 2019 was actually 2 years ago now. It's called Unscripted. It is, I used to say it's a smart beach read, but seeing as no one goes to the beach anymore unless you live at the beach, it's a smart sofa read about a young woman with a crush on an actor and a plan to get him to marry her. You have to read it to see if that actually happens or not. She's British and he's American, and there's like part of it set in London, part of it is set in California. So yeah, should satisfy the Anglophiles among the listeners. And it was published by a company called Unbound, who are quite unusual in the UK as well, in that they crowdfund their books. So they sort of act exactly like a traditional publisher. They do all the copy editing and cover design and, you know, all the things that you would expect from a publisher. But in order to fund the book, they do it through essentially pre-orders. I mean, that's basically what the crowdfunding is. And so, yes, they've had some big bestsellers. Probably the biggest bestseller they had is a book called The Good Immigrant, which is a collection of essays by immigrants in the UK. And the idea being that immigrants are sort of, it's okay if they're a good immigrant. If they did something worthwhile, then we can keep them. And it's kind of debunking that idea that like we actually just have worth as human beings, regardless of whether we are doctors or, you know, did some random amazing achievement. Anyway, and that's part of the mission of Unbound, is to publish books like that mainstream publishing would maybe just not take a risk on. This was a few years ago too. I hope that mainstream publishing has got a bit better about diversity, but it didn't used to be great. And British publishing, I think, is a bit further behind American publishing on that. Anyway, sorry, I digress into all kinds of topics, but but yeah, and so that's how they're sort of well regarded within the industry. And so my book was published by them in 2019 as a paperback and an ebook. And the ebook they also published in the US, but they didn't publish the paperback in the US. So I got the rights back for the paperback. So I self-published that part in the US. So you can get it here, but it's like a different edition essentially.
That's such an interesting model to fund the book through pre-orders. I have heard of publishers doing that. And I find that really interesting how that works, because I work for a traditional book publisher here in the US. And yeah, I just can't imagine. But I think it's an interesting model. And a way to think outside the box for sure. Yeah, and it minimizes the risk for the publisher essentially, because by the time they've covered their costs basically. So then it is exhausting. I have to say I wouldn't recommend it from the author perspective. It's just you have to really hustle for your book. And I'm used to hustling, and you have to hustle anyway. I mean, traditionally published authors, everybody does, but I think there's something different. Hustling before you even have a physical thing to show anyone is even harder. So, and also because you have to explain to people like, no, this isn't a scam. This is a real legit publisher. Whereas if you have a book, you're like, I have had a book published, please buy it. It's kind of a different level of hustling. It'd be interesting if like more established authors who'd already been published tried it and see. And so like, I don't know, it would lend it more, not legitimacy, but like, yeah, people would see like, okay, this is safe to put my money towards. And then up and coming authors, then it would be easier for them.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh, you said that there are a lot of British books that people just aren't talking about over here. So what are some that you would recommend to our listeners? Maybe some that are already out and maybe some that we should look out for in the coming months or year.
So let me pull up my list because I didn't want to forget any. Because your question said you wanted one, and I was like, one? I don't think I can do one.
We will allow more than one.
I mean, we say one, like 20 is fine.
So yeah, stop me when I've talked for too long. But
I have a whole notebook. Keep going.
But yeah, I'm finding with the times we're living in, a lot of people are finding that their concentration span is not what it used to be. And my solution to that for a lot of people and for me is to read books with really short chapters, or books in letter form, or books in diary form, because all those things, just shorter chunks. And then usually you get sucked in, but you kind of need that initial, you look at the page and it's not like a block of text. And so I've been thinking about diary type books and letter type books, which is partly how I ended up reading Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, etc., which is high on my recommendation list. But another book that is a modern classic in the UK, but not really known here, it's called The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4. And it's technically a YA book.
Yeah.
And I read it as a teenager and I liked it as a teenager, but it is much, much better as an adult, because he's so earnest and he's so, there are just things he doesn't know about the world yet. And when you're reading as a teenager, you don't know those things either. So you bond with him because you get it. But as an adult, it's kind of even better because you know, just there's added layers. And so he's writing, it's the 80s in the UK, which I think is part of the reason it's not well known here, because there's a lot of stuff about Margaret Thatcher, and he is a aspiring poet, and he keeps trying to send poems to the BBC, who keep rejecting him, and he has his zits and he has his crush on this girl, and it's like, it's all standard teenage stuff, but it's really, really funny and lighthearted, but also poignant, and you also really feel for him. His parents are like not getting on, and just a lot of the classic teenage struggles. In some random town in the middle of England, basically. So that's The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4. And there's a whole series of them. I've actually only read the first one.
Yeah, I forgot all about those books. I read a couple of them, I think, in graduate school. One of my roommates had them, and she was like, you have to read these books. And you're absolutely right. They were fantastic. I'll have to track them down.
Yeah, so I'm on a mission to get people to read them here. So that's one of my big recommendations. And then so I'm in backlist, but I'll come to front list. But these are all kind of classics / backlist. Another absolute classic, which was known here too because there was a movie, One Day by David Nicholls. Massive book in the UK. Lots of writers my age and my generation basically like want to write like David Nicholls. And if you're interested in British culture at all, it's a culture in the sense of, what was going on in, pop culture and just the news and everything. It's really interesting because he writes, so the story starts at the end of the 80s and goes through to the early 2000s, and it's a story of a friendship / relationship. And obviously the main thing you're reading for is, are they going to get together or what? But you also get amazing character, I don't know if I want to say growth, because one of them doesn't really grow, but character development and just like insights into the characters. But you also get a real insight along the sidelines of how society is changing and how things are changing, just from the little things like phones and how pretentious it is to have a phone in the mid-90s versus later on, and just little things like that. And it's just so well written. I reread it recently, having not read it for a decade, and yeah, I'm still mad about the ending. So it does not have 5 stars on my Goodreads, even though it is an amazing book. I just couldn't do it. But yeah, so One Day, if you haven't read it, is great. And then back to the whole idea of short chunks. There's a book called Love, Nina, and it's a nanny, again in the 80s. I'm apparently very nostalgic, but it's a nanny in the 80s in London writing home about the family that she's nannying for. So again, it's short chunks. It's funny. It's sort of a warm, nice book. And she's written other books as well. I haven't read all of them. The ones I've read, I've enjoyed. But the first one is just a nice book to read. Shall I keep going?
Yes, please.
Lovely.
Another one. This one did come to the US. I don't know what they did to the US version. It might be very different from the UK version. In the UK, it's called Freshers. In the US, it's called Freshmen, and it's about the first semester of, or term as we call them, of university. This couple who, I can't remember now because I read it a few years ago. They either are dating and they end up at the same college, or they start dating very soon as they get to college. And it's kind of, again, their friendship and their relationship, but it's very, again, it's technically YA, but I really enjoyed it as a nostalgic sort of trip down, remembering what it was like to feel 19. So yeah, I love that. And the really, really classic, I know you're going to ask me what book I'm looking forward to. So I've been thinking about Kazuo Ishiguro, spoiler, and Never Let Me Go is amazing. And Remains of the Day is an incredible, incredible book. If you, but you need to like quiet, thoughtful, reflective, nothing much happens books. But yeah, that's amazing.
We actually read that in high school. I was assigned that book
in high school.
It was an AP literature class. So my teacher, his name was William St. John. He was a huge Anglophile. So I think that's why it was on the list, because I probably would have assumed, a lot of people read this, right, in high school. No, but it was so good. It's such a beautifully written book. Yeah. We're actually reading his new one, Clara and the Sun, coming out this year in March, and that's going to be
next week.
Yeah.
Next week.
So yeah, I'm super excited about it. Yeah, beautiful writing.
Yeah. And then another book that hasn't had the attention that it should have had, and also it was quite big in the UK, and I think the problem actually, they changed the title for the paperback, but they should have changed it immediately because it doesn't mean anything to Americans. It's called the Lido, and the Lido in the UK means a outdoor swimming pool, basically, which is more of a weird thing in the UK because it's not warm that much, so we don't swim outside that much. So, but it got changed. The title got changed to Mornings with Rosemary, which is not that great a title either, but at least it's words that Americans understand. And it is about a Lido, so an outdoor swimming pool that is threatened with closure, and the community that comes around to save it, basically. And at the center of that, there's a friendship between a young, lonely journalist who's like 25 and she's just arrived in London, and then an older widow who's really sad, but she's like always swam in the Lido her whole life. And so they kind of make friends, and the community comes around them. There's a secondhand bookstore as part of the story. It's just a lovely, delightful book if you just want a nice book. So yeah, but I'm really sad that didn't make more of a splash, pun intended.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Are there any books coming out soon that, the Kazuo Ishiguro?
Yes.
You should.
Yeah, that's my number one pick.
Yeah.
Out of British books at least. I'm very excited, and I'm very jealous of all the people who seem to have galleys. I don't know why no one sent me one, but anyway. I'm not really reading literary fiction right now anyway, so I'm telling myself it's fine. My brain just can't do it. So so there's a book called, speaking of titles that changed, in the UK it's called Uncoupling, and it came out in February. It doesn't come out in the US until the summer. It's called, and they've put the word Paris in it because that's one of the things American publishers do, is they always stick the word Paris in the title because it helps sell a book. So The Paris Connection, and it's about a girl on a train with her boyfriend, and she moves carriages, what do you call them, cars? She moves cars in the middle of the night, and the train separates, uncouples, and so her boyfriend ends up in Amsterdam where they're supposed to be going, and she ends up in Paris where she's not supposed to be. And she's supposed to be in Amsterdam for a wedding, and so it's all like a big disaster. But of course she meets a guy in Paris, and she has this like day with this guy. And yeah, I interviewed the author for my podcast. She's going to be my next guest. Well, my next episode is going to be with her. So yeah, I really enjoyed that book. It's going to be a good summer read over here. So yeah. And then Act Your Age Eve Brown I was just talking about I'm only halfway through, but I can't imagine that I'm going to stop liking it, because she's just so funny, but not it doesn't feel like she's trying to be funny. It just feels like her natural voice.
Right.
Have you had Talia Hibbard on your podcast?
I have, yeah. When Act Your Age, no, what's it called? The first one. Chloe Brown one.
Get a Life.
Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Yeah, when that came out. And then, well, I mean, again, I could talk for a long time, but there's, so along the lines of authors who are well known in the UK and less well known here, there's a woman called Dolly Alderton, who is a big deal in the UK. She used to co-host a podcast called The High Low, which was one of the most popular podcasts. It just ended, which broke my heart and thousands of other people's hearts. It's sort of a podcast of news and culture, and they talked a lot about books, actually. So if anyone needs a podcast to binge listen to, it's a good one. And she wrote a memoir last year, well, no, a few years ago, but it got published in the US last year, so I got to interview her. And then she has a novel that's already out in the UK, coming out in the US in a couple of months, called Ghosts, and it's ghosting in the sense of dating, that kind of ghosting. And I really want to read that. So, and then there's another one, again, this is one that's out in the UK, not yet out here, but called Olive, and it's by Emer Gannon, who's another actually another like big podcaster person. And that one is about friends, a group of friends, and their various decisions around motherhood and whether to be a mum, and what happens if you decide you don't want to be a mum and all your friends are parents. So I really want to read that. I think it's a really important conversation to be having. So yeah, and even though they're out in the UK and I could have imported them, I haven't yet. So I want to try and read those this year.
Went out. We were just having a conversation offline about books about moms, and but then it turned into a discussion about, well, what about people who choose not to have kids, or and that would be really interesting to read. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much for giving us too many now. My to-be read pile is going to go through the roof, but those all sound amazing.
Yes.
I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I like talking about books. So
so do we.
I'm trying to figure out what of these I need to read first, and I think the only real answer is all of them right now.
Yeah.
Claire, tell us, where can people find you on social media, your podcast, all of that stuff?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm everywhere on social media. I have 1,000 different accounts. It's always hard to know how to answer this. But the podcast stuff is the Instagram and the Twitter are both Britlit podcast. And I tweet sort of book news and stuff like that. And I Instagram I highlight new releases every week. I might start doing some more exciting stuff on my podcast Instagram as well. And then me personally, I'm on Bookish Claire on Twitter, and on Instagram I'm at Claire and Her Books, because Bookish Claire somehow isn't available, even though there isn't an account that's using it. It's very frustrating. So yeah, Claire and Her Books. My book is Unscripted by Claire Handscombe, and yeah, my podcast, the Britlit podcast, is found everywhere you get your podcasts, I think, unless there's some random new channel I don't know about. But
basically, I always say to them, I think we're everywhere. I don't know.
Yeah, it's in all the main places at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. There's some other stuff floating around. I'm also a big West Wing fan. I have West Wing dedicated stuff out there. So if you Google me, you'll find all kinds of things.
Nice. Love that show. Have you listened to the West Wing Weekly podcast?
Yes, big fan. Yeah, also very sad that it ended, but
I've actually never watched it. And, well, I know. You knew this. We talked about it.
I just can't believe it's still true.
Well, for the last 4 years, I'm pretty sure it would have driven me into a suicidal depression.
Yeah.
But now that we have a better president, maybe it's time.
Yeah, I haven't watched it much the last 4 years, I have to say.
Yeah.
Other people went the other way and just watched it nonstop, but
it was nice to watch a government functioning company.
Yeah.
So it was a good rewatch. Well, we could sit and talk all day about The West Wing and books. But thank you again for joining us. This was fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks
thank
for
you.
having me. This was great.
So that's our show. Again, if you wanted to get Book of the Month, your first month for $9.99, use the promo code What You Should Read, all one word.
And don't forget to follow us on social media. We are WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Goodreads, What You Should Read Podcast. And you can also follow my YouTube channel. It'll be linked down below.
Rachael reads.
Rachael reads. And be sure to catch up on the readathons we've got going on right now. The Bachelorette readathon, and then we also have the 'Tis the Damn readathon starting March 1st. So it's already going on by the time you're hearing this. So be sure to check out our Instagram to learn more about it.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.